Social. Today, our guest is Dr. Ishmael Edwards, Vice President of College Relations here on the campus of Rust College. And our discussion is the history of Rust College and the history of MI. Thank you for coming, Dr. Edwards.
Thank you, Nikayla. It's my pleasure to be with you.
No problem. So I guess my first question is just, I guess, the oldest school. Like, how long has it been here, MI?
Mississippi Industrial was founded in the 1920s, and of course Rust in 1866. Mississippi Industrial closed in the early 80s. Very good institution, very strong institution. Rust's biggest rival, always, and back in the day when we had football, everybody would be in the stadium to see Rust and Mississippi Industrial play, and then when we dropped football and they dropped football, basketball was our largest event, and it was the same, standing room only in the gymnasium when we competed. Mississippi Industrial was a Christian Methodist institution.
Okay.
And of course, Rust, United Methodist. So it was both Methodists, but different denominations of Methodists.
So, just like Rust, did the Methodist Church founded in Mississippi Industrial?
Mississippi Industrial was founded by Dr. Elijah Cottrell, who was a Christian Methodist. And of course, Rust was founded by Dr. A.C. McDonald and the Reverend Moses Adams. So though they both were Methodists, they were different denominations of Methodism.
Okay. So what were the curriculums from at Mississippi Industrial versus at Rust?
Rust, of course, was liberal arts curriculum, and Mississippi Industrial was both liberal arts and technical, so to speak. They carpentry, auto mechanics, those kind of bricklaying, those kinds of programs, as well as liberal arts programs.
Okay. So mostly like construction work or renovating or anything like that, like we do today?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, a number of black business owners were graduates of Mississippi Industrial for contracting and concrete finishing, electricians, plumbers, those kinds of things, as well as teachers and doctors and lawyers. So they were both technical and liberal arts, whereas Rust was strictly liberal arts.
Sounds like the perfect school for today, for people who are trying to look for work now. What caused it to close?
Well, I don't know all the parameters and everything involved in that. Of course, competition with other institutions, state community colleges offered some of the same programs, and of course at a lower cost for students, and integration came about. So a lot of students, black students, went to other institutions, majority institutions, and so forth. I would think would have a lot to do with it, and then lack of financial support, I'm sure, from alumni and so forth.
So when MI closed, did most of the students there come to Rust, transfer to Rust?
I wouldn't say most. Many transferred to Rust, and then others transferred to other institutions, Lane, Miles, Texas College. Those were CME, and those are because they're still active CME institutions. Rust and MI tried to merge over the years. When I was a student here in the late '60s, early '70s, they tried to merge, and it had happened before then. Uh, we would take classes over there, and they would take classes over here, and a good relationship, but they never could work the merger out where it would actually become something that was doable and workable.
Right.
But it was a great experience, and even though we were rivals, um, you know, their teachers teaching us and our teachers teaching them, and a lot of Russ students, Merritt MI students, and vice versa. Because we right here just street separating the two institutions.
Right.
So it was a pretty close relationship.
Okay. So when did Rust, I believe, buy the property of MI?
Roughly about 10 years ago, the property became available, and we were able to purchase it. When MI first closed, Russ tried to purchase the property then, but they weren't ready to sell at that point. And I think probably with hopes of reopening and revitalizing the institution, we leased some property over there. Our business department was over there in Washington Hall, and then we also leased some residence hall spaces from them, where the ICS headquarters is located now.
Okay.
That facility was only a few years old, and so we housed some of our male students over there during that period, and to try to help keep the property up, and with the hopes of being able to purchase it. But many years passed between that time, the closing, and us purchasing, roughly about 10 years ago.
Okay. So now MI is still standing. Is there any plans on using the property for future students coming into us?
Yeah, as you say, it's still standing, and we are renovating the facade of one of the facilities, Carnegie Hall, the auditorium, which seats about 2,000 students. And when that building was active, it had the auditorium facility there with stage and dressing rooms and all that on the first floor, on the second floor. And on the first floor housed, I think, a few classrooms, as well as the cafeteria was housed there. But we hope at some point that we can find the resources to restore Carnegie Hall. And as I say, right now we're just working on the facade so that the front entrance will look like it did when it was originally constructed. Then the other building over there, Davis Hall, it's usable. Before the police department bought the station where they're located now, they were housed in that facility.
Oh, wow.
So with a little work, that facility would be usable. And the space that we use for residence hall, that's now headquarters for ICS, there's a possibility that we may, once the lease is up and we can work out certain details, we may take that facility and use it for student housing.
Okay.
And if our enrollment gets to that point that we desperately need it, then that we will do. And even if it doesn't, in order to upgrade our student housing facilities, we still might do that.
Okay. So let me ask you, now it's time to get on to Russ College.
Okay.
So the history of Russ College, from what I understand is to students, is that it used to be a slave auction, and over time it was turned into a school. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the building right next door to us, the front of that building of Francis A. Hathorne Oakview Mansion, That front area and that front porch is said to have been a former slave auction mart, where slaves were sold and traded right here on this campus. Later, during the period of the Civil War, General Grant's troops camped on this spot. And of course, now Airlywood, which is now the president's home, is where President and at that time General Grant's family lived during the period of the Civil War when they came through the area. So we have gone from a slave auction mart, a Union campground, to a full-fledged, fully accredited 4-year institution of higher learning. It is said that the college came about at the end of the Civil War. Many ministers from the North came to the South to establish churches, and Reverend Moses Adams, who was a former slave, had a little church, or was trying to start a little church called Asbury, and the preacher from the North, some say Iowa, some say he's from Illinois, and some say Pennsylvania, so we're not really sure where Dr. McDonald's roots are, but they were in a meeting and electing officers of the church and so forth, and establishing the church. And Dr. McDonald said he had never seen a group of people so eager to do the work of the church, but when they got to church clerk or church secretary, no one volunteered for that position. And Reverend Adams told him that no one here can read or write. And so at that point, Reverend McDonald said, yes, we will build a church and start a church, but we will also start a school. And so out of that, Rusk College was founded in 1866.
Okay. So what made, so it was originally, when it became a school, it started as a HBCU.
Well, yeah, HBCU wasn't a term that was used then. It was a school for the newly freed slaves. And so, it has always been historically a black institution, but would accept a student from any race, any nationality, any creed. There were no restrictions there. So all were welcome, the same as it is today. All are welcome, regardless of your religious preference, your sexual preference, your nationality, your ethnic background, or whatever. Our doors are open.
So what are some significant events that happened here on the campus of Rusk College?
Very significant. During the Civil Rights era, Rusk College was a safe haven for civil rights workers. This was when they were coming into the state of Mississippi. This was probably the first stop. And there's a marker on Rusk Avenue that you probably have noticed near the little convenience store down there. Yes. But there was a house there that was called the Kofo House, and many of the civil rights workers would live there when they were coming through to go to other parts of the state to register voters and during the civil rights movement. That's I think probably the most significant, because Rusk has always been in the forefront of producing first-class citizens, and of course the first step toward that is the right to vote, and people taking advantage of their right to vote, because that's, your elected officials are the ones that make the decisions that will determine really how your life as far as being treated as a first-class citizen and being equal is done. So I think that would probably be the most significant. Of course, we've had doctors, lawyers, and bishops, and various denominations, you name it, political people, you know, mayors of cities and that kind of thing. So in almost every walk of life, Rust has produced some very, very valuable citizens.
Okay. Okay. So what has Rust done for Holly Springs?
And this may be excuse me, a biased thing to say, but I think Rust is Holly Springs. Excuse me. Of course, as you know, the mayor of the city is a Rust graduate. Rust is one of the largest employers within the county. There are other industries that are moving in now, but for many years, I think Rust was probably the backbone of this community in terms of not only educating the citizens, but as a major contributor in the financial stability of the city. I think without Rust in Holly Springs, it would be a totally different city. We may be like some of the small towns in the Mississippi Delta, you know, struggling to survive. But Russ has always been out front in leading the charge in helping to develop the city and doing whatever it possibly can do to upgrade and help stabilize the Holly Springs community.
So do you think that the students have some significant action here in Holly Springs as well?
Students are very significant. If you think in terms of the growth in political aspirations within the city, Russ, with 800 to 1,000 students, could probably dominate the citywide elections because of the impact of the number of students that we have here. So yeah, it's a tremendous impact financially. You know, students spend millions of dollars in the city.
Right.
So there's that, and that's why I say without Rust, the city will look totally different, I think.
Right. Okay, so we'll be back after this break. Welcome back to K Social with our guest, Dr. Edwards. So earlier in the show, you told us that you were a student here. So how was that? How was it like being a student versus being staff?
The best days of my life. And it's interesting how I came to Russ. I was familiar with Russ because my dad was United Methodist, and so, you know, growing up in the Methodist Church, I knew about Rust, but I had no intentions of going to college. My plan was when I finished high school to go into the Army, get in the engineering corps and learn how to build bridges and roads, do 20 years, come out and start my business. Those were my intentions. But when I graduated high school, the Vietnam War was going on, and it was tough, and I didn't believe in that war, and I didn't want any part of that war, even to the point that I was ready to go to Canada if needed. But I got my letter, my draft letter, and I had to go to Memphis to be examined for the physical examination. But before we left, I knew the lady that was over the local board, and I asked her if there was anything I could do to stay out of the Army. And she said, well, if you get back from Memphis, because they were shipping you out, just like that. She said, if you get back from Memphis and can get into college someplace, she said, I'll do what I can to help you out. So on the way back from Memphis, the bus stopped between Ruston and MI, and some students got off, went on to MI, and some got off and came over to Russ. So I got off and came on over to Russ. I had $25 to my name. It was the middle of September, so school had been going on a month or so, and I got admitted. I was accepted and got admitted and enrolled, and I guess the rest is history. I enjoyed my experience here. Matter of fact, so much so until I've never really left. 4 years I graduated. I started working here a couple of months before I graduated. I did my work study in the physical plant area, and I had some skills because I took industrial arts in high school. So I had some carpentry skills, and that worked well doing my work study in physical plant. Now we can't get any students to work in physical plant, and they don't realize how valuable that could be to them. Not only, if they don't want to go that route in a profession, that's fine, but when you can do your own plumbing, do your own electrical work, do your own carpentry work, you say you will save yourself and your family bundles of money. But anyway, Mr. John Davis was director of the physical plant, and he was, a mentor, a real good friend. Became godfather of my oldest son, and so I started work. My first job here was assistant director of physical plant. I did that for 4 years, and then I was asked to become director of athletics and director of student activities. And so I accepted and did that. An interesting thing, I've never had to apply for a job. I was always offered a job. And at points when I thought something better was offered to me, at some other place, I would always get a promotion. Not saying anything to anybody, but it just worked out that way. And so I did that, and then became associate dean of students, which entailed a lot of other things along the way, other jobs that were added in there, and then dean of students for about 18 years, and then director of development, then to vice president. So that's been the tenure, which now is 47 years. Had no intentions or idea that I would be here, that long. But Russ has been good to me, and Dr. McMillan, who was president at the time, allowed me to get work full time and achieve my master's as well as while I was working full time my doctorate. And it was his influence and his insistence that I pursued the doctorate degree. He would always say, "This is a credentialed society." And he said, "You need the credentials if you're going to stay in higher education." And so he pushed me and prodded me, and so I went ahead and did that, and it's been good. It's been good. Rush has been a great experience for me from beginning to end. But my most enjoyable days, of course, were my college days. I worked hard, I studied hard, I played hard, I coded hard, I did everything hard. I had my fun, but it was great.
So, from your days as a student here, do you see a difference from students today?
I do. In my day, I think we were more serious about our education, and we didn't always know what we wanted to do in life, but when we tackled something, we would see it through. We would do our best. As far as fraternities and sororities, we wanted to have in our fraternity. We wanted to have the most students in the Student Government Association. We wanted to have the highest grade point averages, of all the organizations, and it was just a healthy camaraderie, where we would strive for those things, and we had respect for each other, for ourselves, for the faculty and staff, and a lot of that I don't see today. It's difficult sometimes for me to walk from my office to the library without having to say something to somebody about the type of language that they are using. And of course, they don't see anything wrong with, well, what did I do? What did I say? And it's really atrocious, And sometimes I say, well, what if I'd had a donor in my office who wanted to underwrite your education for the whole 4 years, and then they hear that come out of your mouth, and they withdraw that money. So what about that? The loud, the vulgar. Not all students are that way, and some will apologize and we move on, and some I might even have to send to the dean because it's just difficult to get them to understand. So it's a different day, totally different attitude, I think, with students. And of course, as I say, not all students, because some I've been very impressed with, like you, for an example. I've been very impressed with you and your educational pursuit, and of course the Honda All-Star Challenge, where you served and did exceptionally well. But there's a difference. There's a difference. But I think one thing is that still happens today that happened back in the dark ages when I was in school, and that is the lifetime friendship and the love for each other, among students. I think that's very, very close, very tight, and I see it all the time with graduates and them getting together and staying together and helping each other, and just being a family. And I think that family aspect we do still have, and that's very important.
Okay. So, do you think that students students can go on the same path as you? They graduate, they come back and work here, and you think that's possible for students today?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's possible. Um, as a matter of fact, we employ former students all the time. Some, a few, we might hire in some positions right after graduation, and then many will go on and get advanced degrees and experience in return. Uh, I'm one who never left, but Dr. Ward, for an example, chairs the Math and Science Division. She left and went and earned other degrees and worked at other places and returned. And Dr. Charles Williams and Dr. Hilda Williams, Dr. Warren Booker, all of those Rushtites, and there are others as well, but who worked at other places and earned the top degrees in their field and became professionals and top professionals in their field, and come back. And then some, as I say, might work right after graduation, then leave and go other places and get other degrees and experiences and so forth, and then come back as well. A young graduate who comes to mind who's now on the executive team is Dr. Brock Talley, who graduated just a few years ago and went on to graduate school and has earned both his master's and doctorate, and he's back as our vice president for enrollment services. So, yeah, it's very possible, highly possible.
Okay. So, do you have any hopes that more students will broadcast like PR, Rush College, more to people outside?
Students, whether you know it or not, you are our best recruiters. And speaking a good word about your institution and sharing your experiences and your love for your institution, that's very, very important. It's just like a donor who might give us $100,000, but if you send us 10 students, then that's $140,000. So that's another way to look at it. A lot of students think or don't feel like giving if they can't give a large amount. They small amounts of money. I don't know if they feel embarrassed about giving or what, but any amount that you can contribute to the college is helpful, and you got to start small because you don't have it, but put us in your budget and send us something every year, and eventually you will become a major donor, a major contributor to the institution. But even if you don't have a dime that you can contribute, you can send your friends, your nieces, your nephews, your children, and later on in life, your grandchildren, and that's very important.
So, do you feel like, say, the alumni who comes for homecoming, do you feel like that bond that what they did here made a big effect to today?
Yeah. Again, that bond is very important, and they come back to get together and reminisce and have fun, which is great. And again, that will, as they mature, and when I say mature, I mean get older, and of course, income increase and that kind of thing, then they will give back to the college, and it's always great when you get together you've been out 10 years and you've got classmates you haven't seen in 10 years.
Right.
And then you all get together and reminisce and just have a great time. You know, that's good. And we have a project that's called Class Endowment, where each class is trying to raise a minimum of $25,000 to give to the college for endowment, for scholarship endowment. And the class of '64 has raised over $250,000. And my class, class 71, we've already reached our 25,000, and now we're shooting for 50, and then we'll keep going, and hopefully we'll get to 500,000 before the good master calls me home. But yeah, it's nothing like the great family atmosphere of Russ College, small institution. It's an historically black institution, and believe it or not, we have graduates from major universities who did not attend Russ and who are not married to a Russ grad, but they enjoy being a part of Russ and our homecoming and our event, and the relationship is shared among alumni and students, that they come and join us as well. Yeah.
So the students of former students of MI, do they do feel that same bond with Russ as well?
It's getting there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as tight, but that bond is growing every day. Our alumni associations now, we call them the Russ MI Association, and we have MI graduates involved with us in those, and some even leading, as the president of that club or that association. So the relationship is getting there. As I think about the local chapter here in Hollis Springs, of the members who attend the local meetings, 50% of them are Mississippi Industrial graduates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the relationship is really becoming strong, and that's a credit to Dr. Beckley, because he started this, of involving the Mississippi Industrial graduates, so they would feel at home and have a place to come, after the institution had closed. So,
Right.
yeah.
So, what do you hope for the students today? What do you hope for their future?
Well, their future is bright. I mean, the sky's the limit, and knowledge is not limited for them. With all the technology that's in the world today, you can find out anything you want to find out in a matter of minutes. So as students mature, and things that you look at today that you say, oh no, why do they do that? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? You will, as you live life and experience things, you will understand, better. But I think the future is bright for students. Every generation, us older people think, oh my God, what's going to happen, when this generation takes over. And so when I was your age, people were saying the same thing. Oh, the hippies! What in the world is going to happen? We got all these hippies, and but the future is bright, and you can become whatever you want to become. Just be free to move around the world, because it's a small world, and whereas in my day, you might just could stay within the United States and get whatever you want, but now it's a global.
Right.
You might have a job in China, As a matter of fact, I have cousins in China working right now, you know. You have a bright future ahead of you. Take advantage of all the opportunities that come your way that's worthy of taking advantage of, and it'll be great.
So what do you have to say to the people who have negative responses to Rusk College?
I'll say don't criticize until you have sat in the seat where the decisions are made. Then you can. And if you just, I mean, you know, people are going to criticize. Healthy criticism is okay, you know, and constructive criticism is fine. But don't condemn an institution that you attend or attended, because you're condemning yourself as well. Because Rust is only as good as the students that we have, and as the faculty and administrators. We all make it up, you know. So do what you can to make it the best that it can be. You know, that there will always be criticism, and you know, anytime you are in a position of authority or leadership, there's always somebody shooting at you, and you can't worry about those kind of things. And as a young person, you do, but you know, as you experience life and everything else, then you realize that some things that you lost sleep over was really not worth it, you know. So stay positive. If you don't have anything good to say about an institution or about a person, then just don't say anything, you know. Because if you badmouth me, somebody else bad-mouthing you, you know. So I thank God that I never let those kind of things bother me, you know. And I try not to judge people, no matter what they do, whether it's good or bad. I try my best not to judge, you know, and it'll be okay.
Well, Dr. Edwards, thank you for coming and talking and expressing and sharing this little bit of history with us today. My name is Michaela Harrell, and that's all.
Sometimes we say things that we really don't mean.